It was 1832, a year when the American frontier pulsed with dreams of destiny and whispered warnings of danger. In the rugged folds of the Smoky Mountains, where untamed wilderness stretched like a vast, uncharted sea, survival demanded grit, and kindness was rarer than a Kentucky moonshine still untouched by revenuers. This is the saga of Abigail Harper, a woman robbed of her sight but never her spirit, and Thomas Graywolf, a Cherokee scout whose vision pierced the divides of culture and creed. Left to perish in a storm's fury, Abigail's odyssey became a testament to the unyielding human heart and the unlikely alliances forged in the crucible of despair. Before we plunge into this tale, let us know where you're joining us from: Boston's cobblestone streets or the wide-open plains of Kansas. If this story stirs your soul, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow I've got a gem waiting just for you. The Storm and Abandonment. Autumn of 1832 draped the Smoky Mountains in a deceptive splendor. Maples and oaks blazed with hues of crimson and amber, their leaves carpeting the forest floor in a crunching tapestry. Yet beneath this vibrant display, winter's icy fingers were already curling through the hollows. A wagon train, bound for the promise of new beginnings in the Tennessee Valley, inched westward, its wheels groaning against rocky trails. Abigail Harper perched on the edge of her wagon's splintered bench, her fingers tracing the grain of weathered wood. Her hazel eyes, open but unseeing, caught only fleeting shadows, a cruel remnant of the fever that stole her sight 3 years prior in a Kentucky summer. At 32, she had mastered her darkness with a quiet resolve, her ears and hands weaving a vivid map of the world she could no longer see. "Camp at Silver Creek tonight," bellowed Samuel Carter, the caravan's grizzled leader, his voice a whip-crack of authority honed by years on the frontier. 3 days to Willow Creek settlement if the skies hold. Abigail reached for her canteen, its leather-warmed water soothing her dry throat. The journey had been relentless, rations thinning, tempers flaring like sparks in a dry barn. She felt the weight of whispered judgments trailing her, the blind woman, the dead weight. Her cousin's husband, Henry Caldwell, had never hidden his disdain for the duty thrust upon him after her parents' deaths in a harsh bluegrass winter. The Caldwells had claimed her only for the deed to her family's land, sold swiftly before they joined the westward trek. Now, with her utility spent, their patience frayed like an old rope. "Abigail," Margaret Caldwell's voice sliced through her reverie, sharp with barely veiled irritation. "The water barrel's near empty again. Did you take more than your share?" "No, Margaret, just my morning sip," Abigail replied, her tone steady despite the familiar sting of accusation. "Well, someone has, and we've miles before the next spring." Margaret's skirts swished as she stormed off, leaving a faint whiff of lye soap and resentment. The wagon jolted forward and Abigail braced herself, her fingers finding the small bundle beside her, her world reduced to a spare dress, a bone-handled comb, her father's broken pocket watch, and her mother's embossed Bible, its raised letters a comfort in sleepless nights. By afternoon, the air thickened with the metallic tang of an approaching storm, a scent Abigail knew as surely as a farmer knows rain. The caravan's pace quickened, desperate to reach the shelter of Silver Creek's pine grove before the deluge. "Storm's rolling in fast," a voice shouted from the lead wagon. "Could be a bad one." Fat raindrops pelted Abigail's face as the wagons shuddered to a halt. Chaos erupted, men barking orders, women herding children, horses whinnying in restless panic. Abigail stayed rooted, knowing her attempts to help would only draw scorn. "Secure the tents," Carter roared. "Tie down anything that'll fly." Lightning cracked, a blinding flash even Abigail's damaged eyes could sense, followed by thunder that rattled her bones. The storm descended like a vengeful spirit. Creeks rising, someone yelled. We gotta move to higher ground. Cold water seeped through the wagon's floorboards, soaking Abigail's hem. Panic surged as she clutched her bundle. Margaret! Henry, she called, her voice swallowed by the storm's howl. A rough hand seized her arm. Move, Henry's voice was taut with fear. Wagons are flooding, everyone's heading for the ridge. He yanked her through the mud, her boots slipping on slick earth. Rain fell in sheets, disorienting even those with sight. Abigail stumbled, her knees sinking into cold mud. Get up, Henry snarled, holding her upright. You're more trouble than— Thunder drowned his words as they clambered up the steepening slope, the caravan's cries fading into the tempest's roar. Wait here, Henry ordered abruptly, pressing her against the gnarled bark of an oak. I gotta help Carter with the horses. Don't move a muscle. His presence vanished before she could protest. Abigail stood frozen, rain streaming down her face, her back anchored to the tree's rough solidity. Minutes bled into hours, the storm's fury easing to a sullen drizzle. Thunder rumbled distantly now, a fading growl. Henry, she called first softly, then with rising desperation. Margaret! Anyone? Only the patter of rain and the drip of water from leaves answered. Dread coiled in her gut, colder than the rain soaking her to the bone. The truth crashed over her like a rogue wave. She had been abandoned. Sliding to the sodden ground, Abigail clutched her bundle, the weight of her isolation crushing. Blind, alone in a wilderness she couldn't navigate, with no shelter and scant provisions, she faced a grim certainty nature or predators would claim her. As night deepened, the temperature plummeted, her wet clothes leaching warmth from her shivering frame. So this is how it ends, she whispered, a strange calm settling over her. There was a bitter relief in the finality, no more sidelong pity she felt but couldn't see, no more being the burden, the afterthought. The forest stirred around her, insects resuming their chorus, an owl hooting mournfully in the distance. Exhaustion tugged at her, her limbs heavy, her thoughts sluggish. Just as consciousness began to slip, a new sound pierced the night, deliberate footsteps, light and measured, approaching through the underbrush. Abigail froze, her breath catching. Bear. Wolf. Or worse, a renegade, the kind whispered about in campfire Angora campfire tales she was never meant to hear. The steps paused, and she sensed a presence nearby watching. Her heart pounded, loud enough to betray her. Then a voice broke the silence, deep and resonant, with an accent unfamiliar yet clear. You are far from your kin, sightless one. The Cherokee guide and the wilderness sanctuary. Abigail Harper's breath hitched, her unseeing eyes wide with a cocktail of fear and fragile hope as she turned toward the stranger's voice. The Smoky Mountains night wrapped around her, its damp chill seeping into her bones, but the voice deep, steady, laced with an accent that spoke of ancient forests and forgotten trails, cut through her despair like a lantern in the dark. They left me, she managed, her words barely a whisper, trembling with the weight of betrayal. The storm came and they left me. Silence hung heavy, not of pity but of judgment, not for her, but for those who'd forsaken her. The stranger spoke again, his tone as unyielding as the granite ridges surrounding them. Night grows colder. Death waits here for the alone. It was no threat, merely truth, delivered with the calm certainty of a man who knew the wilderness like a preacher knows his Bible. I know, Abigail replied, her voice steadier than she felt, surprising herself with its resolve. Another pause, then the rustle of movement as the stranger crouched beside her. She sensed his nearness, caught the scent of tanned leather, wood smoke, and a faint herbal note, sage, perhaps like the bundles her Kentucky grandmother once burned to ward off spirits. I am Thomas Graywolf, he said, known to traders as such, but to my Cherokee kin as Tsisgili, Silent Owl. What do they call you, sightless woman of the white pioneers? Abigail Harper, she answered, tilting her face toward his voice, clinging to the lifeline it offered. And I don't want to die in these woods. Can you stand? Thomas asked, his tone betraying neither warmth nor judgment. Abigail nodded, her limbs stiff from cold and fear. She struggled to her feet, clutching her sodden bundle of possessions, her mother's Bible, her father's broken watch like a talisman against the void. If you're gripped by this tale, hit that subscribe button. It keeps us spinning these yarns. Now back to the story. The storm has passed, but your people have fled, Thomas continued, his voice a low rumble against the forest's night chorus. They climbed the northern ridge, too far now to catch before dawn. Abigail swallowed hard, the confirmation of her abandonment a bitter pill. She'd suspected as much, but hearing it made the wound raw. They didn't search for me, she said, less a question than a statement, though the ache in her chest begged for an answer. One man called your name 3 times, Thomas replied evenly. Another said you'd likely drowned in the creek. A woman wept, but they pressed on. Henry and Margaret Caldwell, fulfilling the barest obligation of conscience before leaving her to the wolves. Abigail's jaw tightened, her fingers digging into the bundle. They'd never meant to find her. Thomas broke the silence. The night grows colder. We cannot linger. Abigail turned toward his voice, startled. We, she echoed, catching the faint trace of dry humor in his response. Unless you wish to stay, he said, a flicker of amusement in his otherwise solemn tone. A humorless laugh escaped her. I choose life. Then we move. My shelter is near, but the path is treacherous. Can you follow? Abigail hesitated, her upbringing screaming caution. Trust no stranger, least of all a Cherokee, whispered about in settler tales as both noble and dangerous. But what choice did she have? Starve, freeze, or fall prey to a bear? I can follow your voice, she said finally, but I cannot see where to step. Thomas considered this, then spoke. Give me your hand. Tentatively, Abigail extended her arm, her fingers wavering in the damp air. Warm, calloused fingers closed around her wrist, not the rough yank of Henry's grip, but a firm, guiding pressure, like a farmer leading a horse through a storm. I will lead you. Speak if you tire or the path grows too hard. They set off through the forest, Thomas moving slightly ahead, his grip a steady tether. The Smoky Mountains terrain was a labyrinth of roots and rocks, but his steps were deliberate, each one placed with the precision of a man born to this land. When a fallen log barred their way, he guided her hand to gauge its height. When the ground dipped into a muddy hollow, his grip tightened, a silent warning. The storm has reshaped the land, he explained, helping her navigate a slick stretch where a mudslide had carved a new scar. Water forges new paths. What was safe yesterday may betray you today. Abigail stumbled once, her boot catching on wet leaves, her breath catching as she pitched forward. Thomas steadied her instantly, his other hand catching her elbow. Thank you, she murmured, embarrassment warring with gratitude for his patience. They pressed on in silence, the forest alive with night sounds, the distant wail of a whippoorwill, the rustle of possums in the underbrush, the drip of rainwater from sagging branches. How did you lose your sight? Thomas asked abruptly, his voice slicing through the rhythm of their trek. Abigail's lips pressed thin, the memory a wound that hadn't fully scarred. Fever 3 summers back, she said. It took my parents and left me in shadows. She didn't mention the friends who'd drifted away, the suitors who'd vanished, the life that had shrunk to dependence on resentful kin. The fever that blinds, Thomas said, a nod in his voice she couldn't see. My people have known it too. His words held no pity, a relief to Abigail, who'd grown weary of sympathy's weight. The ground beneath her boots shifted from soft earth to jagged stone, the air cooling with the scent of a nearby stream. "We follow the creek now," Thomas said. "It leads to my camp." "You don't live with your kin?" Abigail asked, curiosity momentarily eclipsing her discomfort. A pause, heavy with unspoken stories. "I walk between worlds," he said at last. "Scout for the Cherokee, guide for white settlers when their coin is good. Trusted by both, bound to neither." The words struck Abigail like a hymn, resonating with her own isolation, different in root, but kindred in its ache. "Your English is strong," she observed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Mission school till I was 12, he replied. "Then 5 years with a trader from Louisville who needed a tongue for Cherokee and Creek. And now you're saving a blind woman in the wilderness," Abigail said, a wry edge to her voice. "Hardly what you planned for tonight." "Plans are for those who think they tame the trail ahead," Thomas said, amusement warming his tone. "I follow the path that opens." They walked in silence again, Abigail focusing on the rocky ground beside the creek, its rush growing louder, a wild symphony of water over stone. "We cross here," Thomas announced, stopping abruptly. "The water's shallow, but the stones are slick." "I'll carry you." Before she could protest, he secured her bundle to his person, then lifted her effortlessly, one arm behind her back, the other beneath her knees. Abigail's arms instinctively looped around his neck, startled by the sudden closeness. Thomas stepped into the creek, his movements sure despite the shifting stones beneath him. She felt the flex of his muscles, the subtle adjustments as he balanced against the current. Cold spray kissed her face, sharp and invigorating. "We've crossed," he said, setting her gently on the far bank. "Thank you," Abigail murmured, heat rising to her cheeks despite the night's chill. It had been years since anyone had treated her with such careful strength, like a partner in survival, not a burden to be borne. The path began to climb, the forest sounds shifting, fewer insects, more wind whistling through bare branches. Abigail sensed the openness of higher ground. "The shelter's ahead," Thomas said after a silent ascent. "A cave in the hillside, small but dry." "How did you find me?" Abigail asked, the question bursting free. "Of all the places in these mountains, how were you there when I was left?" Thomas was quiet for several paces. "I've tracked your caravan since yesterday," he admitted. "I watch all who cross Cherokee land. You meant to approach them?" "No. Too many, too armed, too fearful." His voice held no judgment, only fact. "But when the storm hit, I saw them scatter, regroup, and leave. One was missing." "You counted," Abigail said, the single word heavy with the wisdom of survival. They reached the cave, its entrance shielded by a rocky overhang. Thomas guided her inside. "Wait here," he instructed, releasing her wrist. She heard him move deeper, the shuffle of dry grass, the sharp strike of flint, then the crackle of kindling catching flame. Warmth bloomed against Abigail's face, a benediction after the night's ordeal. She closed her eyes, a habit from sighted days, savoring the heat. "Come," Thomas said, guiding her to the fire. He helped her settle on a mat of woven grasses, the scent of cedar and pine filling the small space. "Your clothes are soaked. They must dry, or sickness will take you. There's a rabbit fur blanket beside you." "I'll turn away." Abigail's fingers found the soft pelt, its warmth a stark contrast to her clammy dress. "I thank you," she said, propriety warring with survival's demands. She heard Thomas move to the cave's mouth, felt the shift in air as he turned his back. With trembling fingers, she unlaced her dress, pride yielding to the need for warmth. Wrapping the fur around her shoulders, she marveled at its softness, a luxury in this wild place. Here, with a stranger who'd saved her without obligation, the rules of her old life Kentucky parlors, church socials, the weight of others' pity fell away. For the first time in years, Abigail drew a breath that felt truly free. Morning crept into the cave with subtle shifts, the trill of sparrows replacing night insects, sunlight warming the entrance. Abigail stirred, disoriented, her hands seeking familiar textures and finding only stone and fur. Memory flooded back: the storm, the betrayal, the Cherokee scout. She sat up, clutching the blanket. "Your clothes are dry." Thomas's voice came from the entrance, respectfully distant. "I've placed them beside you. Water's in a wooden cup to your right." Her fingers found the rough-hewn cup, the cool, fresh water washing away the night's fear. "Thank you," she said, setting it down. "Could you step outside while I dress?" "I'm already outside," he replied, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Call when you're ready." Alone, Abigail felt for her clothes, neatly folded beside her. The fabric was slightly damp in the folds, but far better than the sodden rags of the night before. A tear in the sleeve, likely snagged during their trek, caught her fingers, a small wound in the fabric of her past life. As she dressed, her mind churned with questions. The caravan was gone, rolling toward Willow Creek without her. Even if Thomas guided her there, what awaited? No kin, no coin, just the same pity she'd endured with the Caldwells. "I'm dressed," she called, smoothing her skirts with hands that trembled from more than cold. Thomas's footsteps returned, accompanied by a rich, earthy scent food. "Cattail roots and smoked venison," he explained, placing a flat piece of bark in her hands, a makeshift plate. Abigail explored its contents: strips of tough meat, small cooked tubers. "The roots grow in the marsh nearby," Thomas said. "Good food when flour's scarce." She bit into a root, its mild, potato-like flavor faintly sweet, unexpectedly comforting. The venison was chewy, smoky, and deeply satisfying. Hunger roared to life. She hadn't eaten since the previous dawn. "You hunt alone?" she asked between bites, piecing together the man who'd become her lifeline. "When necessary," he said, his answer as spare as a frontier cabin. She heard him moving about the cave, gathering items, preparing for something unspoken. "What will you do with me?" Abigail asked, the question heavy with the weight of her uncertain future. Thomas paused. "That depends on what you wish." Abigail Harper. The use of her full name startled her, a reminder of the identity she'd nearly lost. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, the truth a stone in her chest. "Willow Creek is 3 days' travel, if it's even real. I have no money, no family waiting." "Why did you join the caravan west?" Thomas asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Abigail's fingers tightened around the bark plate. "I had no choice. After my parents died, Henry Caldwell took their land. When he decided to go west, I went with them or face the poorhouse." The confession tasted bitter, like chicory coffee brewed too long. "A blind woman has few paths in this world." Silence followed, then Thomas spoke, closer now. "The Cherokee do not cast aside those who see with their hearts. Such people often hold wisdom others miss." He took the empty plate from her hands. "You have choices now. You can try for Willow Creek alone. I'll point the way. I can guide you there myself, a 3-day trek. Or, Abigail prompted when he hesitated. "Or you can stay here for a time. Learn to live in this place, then choose your path when you're stronger." The offer stunned her, as unexpected as a bluebird in a blizzard. "Why would you help me?" she asked, the question raw with disbelief. Thomas was quiet for a moment. "When I was a boy, my grandmother lost her sight in her final years. She was not abandoned but honored. Her counsel sought more than ever. What your people did," he stopped, his voice tight. It is not our way. The simplicity of his words humbled her. No grand gestures, just a belief in worth that transcended her blindness. I would stay, Abigail said before doubt could silence her. At least until I'm less of a burden. Then we begin today, Thomas replied, a nod in his voice. First lesson, the cave and the land around it. What followed was a revelation. Unlike the Caldwells, who'd shielded her from the world, treating her as fragile as a porcelain teacup, Thomas taught her to claim it. He led her through the cave, letting her touch the rough walls, counting steps, 4 from sleeping mat to fire pit, 7 to the entrance, 3 right to water storage. Outside, he oriented her to the sun's warmth. When morning sun hits your face square, you face east. The cave opens southeast. The creek lies west, downhill. He placed a sturdy hickory stick in her hands, showing her how to sweep it in a small arc to detect obstacles. Listen to its sound: stone clacks, earth thuds, roots catch. All morning, Abigail absorbed each detail, her mind a mapmaker's canvas. By midday, she navigated from her sleeping place to the cave's mouth, unaided, a small triumph that sparked a quiet pride. You learn fast, Thomas observed as they shared a meal of hickory nuts and wild blueberries. I've had 3 years to practice remembering what I can't see, Abigail replied. But no one's ever taught me like this. Those who left you thought your mind as blind as your eyes, Thomas said, his words cutting to the heart of the Caldwell's failure. Their loss, not yours. The afternoon brought new lessons. Thomas taught her to identify trees by bark and scent: smooth beech, rough oak, the sharp pine resin that reminded her of Christmas in Kentucky. He showed her how to hear the creek's flow to find direction, how to sense animals by the rustle of leaves. Tonight we'll weave better sleeping mats, he said as they returned to the cave. I'll show you how to braid the grasses. As the sun dipped, the air cooling and forest sounds shifting, Thomas built up the fire, its crackle a comforting hymn. Your hands, he said suddenly. Show them to me. Puzzled, Abigail held them out. His fingers, gentle but sure, examined hers. Soft, he noted. Not used to work. Heat crept to her cheeks. Margaret wouldn't let me do much. She feared I'd break things or myself. These hands must grow strong, Thomas said matter-of-factly. Tomorrow, we start with weaving, fire building, food preparation. You believe I can do these things? Abigail asked, skepticism creeping in, years of enforced helplessness gnawing at her confidence. I know you can, Thomas replied, his certainty a quiet fire. Blindness isn't weakness, Abigail Harper. It's just a different way to walk the world. That night, as she lay on her mat, the fire's soft hiss lulling her, Abigail turned his words over like a river-smoothed stone. Different, not lesser. Capable, not helpless. The idea bloomed within her, a seed cracking open in spring soil. For the first time since the fever, someone saw her potential, not her limits. Sleep came slowly, her mind alive with possibilities. And just before it claimed her, a realization jolted through her. Today, she hadn't once longed for the Caldwells or the caravan. Whatever lay ahead, Abigail Harper had taken her first step toward freedom, not despite her blindness, but with it as part of her strength. Deepening bonds and wilderness trials. Days blurred into a rhythm Abigail Harper could scarcely have imagined in her former life, tethered to the Caldwells' grudging care. Each dawn in the Smoky Mountains began with Thomas Graywolf's quiet voice rousing her from sleep, followed by simple meals: roasted roots, dried venison, or foraged berries that fueled tasks designed to forge both body and spirit. Under Thomas's guidance, she wasn't a fragile relic to be sheltered but a partner in survival, her blindness no barrier to the lessons of the wild. By the 5th day, a gentle rain returned, softer than the storm that had stranded her but persistent enough to confine them to the cave. The steady patter against the rocky overhang wove a soothing cadence, and Abigail matched it unconsciously as she worked on weaving a basket from river reeds Thomas had gathered. "Your fingers find the pattern," Thomas observed, seated nearby, his hands shaping arrowheads from flint with a rhythmic scrape that echoed like an Appalachian ballad. Abigail paused, running her fingers over her work. The basket was rough compared to Thomas's deft creations, but the reeds bent to her more readily than they had days ago. "I've never made anything useful before," she admitted, a wistful note in her voice. "In my father's Kentucky home, I played hymns on the piano and stitched samplers for parlor walls. After the fever, I wasn't trusted even for that." Thomas made a low sound, neither pity nor judgment. "Different skills for different worlds. Here, what you craft keeps you alive." A gust of wind drove rain into the cave's mouth, carrying the rich, loamy scent of wet earth, like the fields after a spring plow. Abigail lifted her face, inhaling deeply. "The rain smells wilder here than in Kentucky," she said. "Like it carries the mountain's secrets." "You're learning to read the world beyond sight," Thomas said, approval warming his measured tone. "What else do you sense?" Abigail closed her eyes, a sighted habit that sharpened her focus. "The birds are hushed, but they'll sing when the rain eases. The creek runs faster today. I hear its voice change." And she hesitated, uncertain. "There's a heaviness in the air, like a storm's brewing bigger than this drizzle." Thomas set down his flint, the scrape falling silent. "Good. You feel the pressure shift. A larger storm comes." Abigail's hands stilled on her basket. "Like the one that tore me from the caravan." "Perhaps," Thomas replied, moving to the cave's entrance. She heard him arranging branches, likely fortifying against the coming weather. "Nature speaks to those who listen." "Will we be safe here?" she asked, a flutter of anxiety stirring. "This cave has stood through many winters," Thomas said. "But we prepare. First rule of the wild, respect what you cannot tame." The afternoon was a flurry of preparation. Thomas guided Abigail's hands to pile stones, diverting water from the entrance, and to stack supplies higher on the cave's walls. They gathered extra firewood, its bark still damp but dry enough to burn. As evening neared, the wind howled like a banshee from Appalachian folklore, the temperature plunging. Thomas built the fire high, its glow a defiant stand against the gathering dark. He placed a warm cup of pine needle tea in Abigail's hands. "Drink. It wards off sickness." The tea was bitter, resinous, like the scent of a Kentucky Christmas tree, but it warmed her core. Abigail sipped, marveling at how her sense of comfort had shifted. A week ago, she'd slept on a wagon's hard bench, eaten from tin plates and fretted over propriety. Now, a stone floor with woven mats, a fur blanket, and this cave's close quarters with a man who'd been a stranger felt like sanctuary. "You're quiet," Thomas noted after a time. Abigail cradled the cup. "I was thinking how fast we adapt when we must. A week ago, I cared about parlor manners and Sunday dresses. Now I'm grateful for pine tea and a dry cave." "People carry too many burdens," Thomas said. "The wild strips them bare, leaves only what matters." His words, simple yet profound, contrasted with the intricate social rules of her Kentucky upbringing: church suppers, quiltings, the dance of who spoke to whom. Here survival was the only etiquette. The storm roared as night fell, rain lashing the entrance, wind shrieking like a wronged spirit. Crashes of falling branches punctuated the gale. Thomas added wood to the fire. "Sleep may be hard tonight. The storm speaks loud." Abigail wrapped her blanket tighter, a shiver not entirely from cold. It sounds angry. Nature is neither angry nor kind, Thomas said. It just is. Men seek meaning where there is none. A violent gust sent embers swirling, followed by a distant crack of splintering wood. Thomas stamped out stray sparks. That was close, Abigail said, her heart quickening. Yes, we should, he stopped, his silence sharp as a snapped twig. What is it? Abigail asked, tension coiling. Listen, he whispered. Abigail strained her ears past the storm's chaos. Then she heard a low, rumbling growl from the cave's entrance, primal and chilling. Her arms prickled. Mountain lion, Thomas breathed, barely audible. Seeking shelter. Fear choked Abigail. One predator was terror enough. A mountain lion spelled death. What do we do? She whispered. Be still. Fire keeps it at bay, usually. They avoid men most times. The qualifier hung heavy. She heard Thomas move with deliberate slowness, the soft scrape of metal, his knife, perhaps, or the small axe for firewood. The growl came again, louder, closer. Abigail imagined the beast, tawny fur, coiled muscle, eyes glinting in the firelight, like the stuffed cougar she'd once touched in a Louisville merchant's study, its menace frozen but palpable. If it comes closer, Thomas murmured, move behind me slow. Abigail nodded, whispering, yes. Minutes stretched into eternity. The lion paced at the entrance, its growls mingling with eerie, human-like cries. The storm raged, likely driving the beast to seek any refuge. Thomas kept the fire blazing, a barrier of light and heat. Abigail sat rigid, every sense razor-sharp. It's moving closer, she whispered suddenly, feeling a shift in the air, a presence heavier than before. Now, Thomas said, voice low. Behind me. Abigail slid backward, her hand finding his shoulder as he positioned himself between her and the threat. His muscles were taut, ready. A snarl tore through the cave, followed by the pad of paws on stone the lion had entered. Thomas spoke, not in English but Cherokee, his voice a commanding chant, syllables rolling like a river over rocks. The words meant nothing to Abigail, but their authority was clear. The lion growled, defiant. Abigail caught its scent, musky, wild, overlaid with wet fur. Thomas shifted, the rasp of his knife being drawn. He spoke again, the chant steady, unyielding. What followed unfolded in a heartbeat, yet felt like hours. The lion roared, a sound so raw it shook Abigail's bones. Thomas surged forward, a blur of motion, snarls, scuffling, a pained grunt from Thomas that stopped her heart. Then a final, wrenching yowl from the lion, followed by the thud of a heavy body hitting the cave floor. Silence fell, broken only by Thomas's labored breathing and the storm's distant wail. Thomas, Abigail called, fear spiking. Are you hurt? Scratched, he replied, voice tight. Not deep. She heard him dragging the beast's body, confirming, it's dead. It'll give us food, fur, when the storm passes. Abigail exhaled shakily. You saved my life again. We saved each other, Thomas corrected. Your warning gave me time. He returned to her side, and her fingers instinctively found his arm, meeting warm, wet blood. You're bleeding, she said, alarmed. Small wounds, he insisted, though his voice betrayed pain. Need cleaning. Abigail straightened. Tell me what to do. For once, Thomas didn't resist her help. Water in the pint by the fire. Clean cloth in my pack. She located the items, her movements careful but sure. Guide my hands, she requested. Thomas directed her as she cleaned 3 deep scratches on his forearm, the lion's claws leaving their mark. The wounds weren't mortal but painful. Plants in my pouch, he instructed. Crush yarrow leaves, apply to cuts. Abigail followed, her touch gentle yet precise, a profound reversal. She was the healer now. "You did well," Thomas said when she finished bandaging his arm. "Steady hands." "I've had practice," Abigail replied, a small smile breaking through. 3 years of doing everything by touch." As they settled by the fire, the storm still raging but the immediate threat gone, Abigail felt a strange pride mingled with lingering fear. "Will there be more?" she asked. "Mountain lions." "Not likely," Thomas assured her. "They hunt alone, claim wide territories." He paused. "But the wild holds many dangers, some with claws, some with guns." His words reminded her of the fragile line they walked, not just between wilderness and civilization, but between worlds colliding, settler and Cherokee, promise and betrayal. "Is that why you live alone?" she asked, the question slipping out. Thomas was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I've walked too long between worlds to belong to either," he said finally, his voice heavy with old wounds. In that confession, Abigail heard echoes of her own isolation, different yet parallel. Both existed on the margins, navigating boundaries others took for granted. The storm eased as morning dawned, clear and cold. Abigail woke to a new weight on her sleeping mat, the lion's pelt, cleaned and prepared while she slept. "You were busy last night," she said, running her fingers through its soft fur like a weaver's finest wool. "Waste nothing," Thomas replied. "The cat gives warmth, meat, tools. Its spirit deserves respect." Over breakfast, roasted lion meat, gamey but hearty, Thomas outlined the day. "Today we leave the cave. You must learn the land beyond." Abigail's stomach tightened. "Is your arm well enough?" The scratches had been deep. "It will heal," he said, dismissing the injury with frontier stoicism. Winter nears. Knowledge of the land cannot wait. Outside, the air was crisp, washed clean by the storm. Abigail inhaled, catching fresh scents: rain-cleansed leaves, broken pine, mushrooms sprouting in damp soil. "Take your stick," Thomas instructed. "Today we build a map in here." He tapped her forehead lightly. Thomas led her in widening circles from the cave, teaching her to read the land through touch, sound, and scent. Sloping ground showed direction. The sun's warmth oriented her. Creeks and deer paths formed natural guides. "The forest speaks always," he said, pausing by a fallen oak. Pine needles hum different from oak leaves in the wind. Morning birds sing east, evening birds west. The creek flows south to the river. Abigail soaked up each lesson, her mental map growing vivid. When Thomas stepped away, telling her to find the cave alone, panic flared briefly before resolve took root. She stood still, feeling the sun on her right cheek west. The ground sloped down toward the creek north. The cave was southeast. Her stick tapped a faint deer trail, and she followed, counting steps. At a jutting stone shelf, she turned east, guided by wind through young pines. 23 steps later, her stick found the dip leading to the cave. "I'm back," she called, pride swelling. Thomas's footsteps emerged from the cave. "You found it without faltering." "Faster than yesterday." "Yesterday?" Abigail asked, confused. A rare chuckle escaped him. "You think that was the first time I let you navigate alone? I've watched each day, stepping back to let you learn. Today I just told you." Abigail wavered between indignation and gratitude. "You've been testing me." "Teaching," Thomas corrected. "Confidence comes from doing, not being told you can." His words struck deep, a stark contrast to the Caldwells hovering, their insistence on her fragility. "Thank you," she said, "for believing I could before I did." The afternoon brought new skills, identifying edible plants by touch and smell. Serrated raspberry leaves, smooth wild onions, fuzzy mint stems. Winter comes soon, Thomas reminded her. Plants sleep. We harvest now, store knowledge for spring. As they gathered blackberries, Abigail sensed a shift in Thomas's demeanor, a quiet urgency. She paused, her fingers stained purple. You're worried, she said. Thomas hesitated, rare for him. Word may have reached Cherokee villages about the white woman in my care. Questions will come, maybe trouble. Abigail's hands froze. Your people wouldn't approve. Some wouldn't. Others might understand, Thomas said, a sigh escaping a rare crack in his calm. Cherokee ties with settlers fray with each broken treaty, each stolen acre. Her presence complicated his already precarious place between worlds. I should go, she said, the words painful but necessary. To Willow Creek as planned. Could you survive the journey alone? Thomas asked, not unkindly. They both knew she could not yet. I don't want to bring you trouble, she said softly. Trouble finds every path, Thomas replied. Better to face it ready. They returned to the cave as dusk fell, Abigail's basket heavy with foraged goods. Thomas was quieter, his thoughts elsewhere. As they prepared dinner, Abigail noted his movements, the precise slice of his knife, the gentle tap against stone. His presence had become more than safety. It was respect, a belief in her capacity to grow. I've been thinking, Thomas said abruptly as they sat by the fire. Tomorrow we start new lessons. What kind? Abigail asked, curiosity piqued. To hear what cannot be heard, he said. The Cherokee believe those without sight see clearer with the spirit. My grandmother had this gift in her blindness. Abigail fell silent, unsure. In her Kentucky upbringing, talk of spirits belonged to revival tents, not daily life. You doubt, Thomas observed, no judgment in his voice. I don't know what to believe anymore, she admitted. Everything I was taught feels like a child's tale now. Thomas added wood to the fire, its crackle filling the pause. When eyes close, other paths open, but only for those who walk them. What does that mean? Abigail asked. It means you choose. Trust only what others taught you or find truths for yourself. The words, simple yet vast, lingered as she lay on her mat that night, the lion's pelt a warm shield. Her world had shrunk when blindness came, hemmed by others' limits, her own fears. Yet here, with a man whose roots couldn't be more different, her world expanded, new skills, new senses, new possibilities. What truths awaited if she embraced this path? As sleep claimed her, Abigail felt more alive than she had since the fever, facing the future with curiosity, not dread. Visitors from the village. Dawn broke with a soft, rhythmic chant in Cherokee, vibrating through the cave's cool air. Abigail stirred, orienting herself to the unfamiliar sound. Thomas, she called, the chanting ceasing. You're awake early, he said, his voice steady. The singing woke me, Abigail replied, wrapping the lion's pelt around her shoulders. What was it? Morning prayer, Thomas explained. Greeting the sun, honoring ancestors, asking for clear thoughts. A pause, then, it's not singing. She caught a flicker of amusement in his correction. Will you teach me the words? She asked, surprising him. Perhaps, he said after a moment. First, other lessons. Breakfast was dried berries softened in hot water, and the last of the lion meat. Today, you learn to listen beyond hearing, Thomas said. To feel what cannot be touched. That sounds impossible, Abigail said, raising an eyebrow. Many things seem impossible until they are done, he replied, leading her outside. The morning air was sharp with late autumn's bite, like a Kentucky frost before the first snow. Instead of the forest, Thomas guided her to a flat, sun-warmed rock overlooking the valley. Sit. Cross your legs if you can. Abigail settled on the smooth stone, the sun's rays warming her face. Thomas sat beside her, close but not touching. "Close your eyes," he said, then added with rare humor, "though for you that's no change." She smiled. "They're closed. Now what? Breathe deep. Feel air fill you, leave you. Nothing else matters, not past, not future, only this breath." Abigail complied, the practice familiar from childhood, when her grandmother taught her to calm nerves before piano recitals. "Now," Thomas continued, his voice softening, "listen to the world not for one sound but all at once. Let them come together." The instruction puzzled her, but she tried. Instead of picking out bird calls, rustling leaves, or the creek's gurgle, she let them blend. Gradually, the forest's voice became a single tapestry, its countless threads woven into one. "The land speaks," Thomas said quietly, "in patterns, rhythms. When something breaks these, those who listen know." They sat in silence, time stretching fluidly. The sun climbed, warming her hands. Then Thomas stiffened. "Someone comes." Abigail hadn't heard anything unusual. "How do you?" "Birds on the eastern ridge went quiet," he said, then sang in alarm, not greeting. Now she noticed it, a subtle shift in the bird's cadence. "Who is it?" she asked, rising, suddenly aware of her vulnerability. "Not settlers," Thomas said, tension easing. "Cherokee. 3, maybe 4, he touched her elbow. "Come. We meet them at the cave." They returned, Thomas gathering items, his knife, a pouch of sacred herbs, a carved pipe Abigail hadn't seen him use. "Friends or—" She trailed off. "We'll know soon," he said. "Stay by the fire. Speak only if spoken to." The instructions heightened her nerves, but she nodded, taking her place. Minutes later, footsteps confirmed his prediction. Words in Cherokee followed, Thomas's tone respectful, the newcomer's questioning perhaps challenging. Abigail sat still, feeling unseen eyes assess her. Thomas switched to English. "Abigail, these are my kin from the village. Tsula, a medicine woman, her son, Yana, and it's Scylla who leads our hunters." "Greetings," Abigail said, inclining her head toward their voices. "Thank you for your land's hospitality." Tsula's voice, older, authoritative, responded. "You're the blind one he shelters. Word has reached our village." "Yes," Abigail said simply. "Thomas saved me when my people left me to die." Yana, younger, sharp-edged, spoke next. "Silent Owl collects odd things. A blind white woman's his strangest yet." "Yana," Tsula admonished. "Forgive my son," she continued in English. "His caution speaks louder than his manners." "Nothing to forgive," Abigail said carefully. "Caution is wise in troubled times." Her words seemed to surprise them, sparking a rapid Cherokee exchange. Thomas spoke again. "They bring news and come to see who shares my fire. The news is both good and ill." Abigail leaned forward. "What news?" Tsula answered. "White soldiers are at the trading post at Willow Ford. They talk of new boundaries, new treaties, and they seek a missing settler woman." Abigail's heart skipped. "My caravan." "Perhaps," Tsula confirmed. "They offer gold for word of a blind woman lost in the storm." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The Caldwells were searching, or pretending to. But why, when they'd abandoned her? "The soldiers bring trouble for us," Yana said flatly. "Your presence here could bring more." Thomas responded in Cherokee, his tone firm yet respectful. The exchange grew heated, then calmed. "The council must decide what's best for the tribe," Thomas translated for Abigail. "Tsula suggests you come to the village until this is settled." Fear and uncertainty flooded her, a village of strangers, unknown terrain, potential hostility. Yet refusing could strain Thomas's standing. Would I be welcomed? She asked directly. You'd be safe, Tsula replied, sidestepping warmth. And we'd learn what these soldiers truly want. Abigail squared her shoulders. When do we leave? Tomorrow at dawn, Thomas said. Tonight they share our fire and food. The evening was a strange tapestry. As Thomas and the visitors prepared a meal of roasted rabbit and foraged roots, conversation wove between English and Cherokee. Abigail listened, gleaning impressions. Tsula's wisdom carried weight, Atsila moved with precision, Yana's suspicion lingered like a storm cloud. Over dinner, Tsula addressed Abigail. Thomas says you learn the forest ways quickly. I have a good teacher, Abigail replied, and more reason than most to listen. Tsula's next question caught her off guard. What did you dream last night? Abigail hesitated, the query odd. Dreams speak truth the waking mind misses, Tsula explained, especially for those who walk in darkness. I dreamed of a river, Abigail said carefully, wide with two paths from its banks. I stood between, unable to choose. A heavy silence followed. The river of decision, Tsula said. You stand at its edge, blind one. Soon you must choose. As night deepened and the visitors settled by the fire, Abigail pondered Tsula's words. A choice loomed between her past and an uncertain future, between the settlers' world and the Cherokees. Tomorrow's journey to the village would bring answers to questions she hadn't yet formed, and perhaps a path she couldn't yet see. The village and the banker's shadow. Dawn broke over the Smoky Mountains with a thin mist clinging to the forest floor, like spirits lingering from an Appalachian ghost tale. Abigail Harper woke to the soft murmur of Cherokee voices and the rustle of preparations. Thomas Graywolf's familiar step approached, placing a bundle beside her sleeping mat. Moccasins, he said. Better for the journey than your boots. Abigail's fingers traced the supple deerskin, feeling intricate beadwork that spoke of care and skill. They're beautiful, she said, touched by the gesture. Did you make them? Tsula, Thomas replied. She worked through the night. Says your feet have earned proper covering for walking this land. The medicine woman's kindness, despite the village's wariness, stirred hope in Abigail, a flicker of acceptance in a world of uncertainty. Breakfast was hurried. Dried venison and a minty tea with an earthy undertone, like the herbal brews her Kentucky grandmother once swore by. As they prepared to depart, Thomas guided Abigail through a final sweep of the cave. We may not return, he said, helping her gather her possessions, the lion's pelt, her mother's embossed Bible, a few essentials now tucked into a leather pouch. The cave, her first true sanctuary since losing her sight, felt like a chapter closing. I'm ready, she said, slinging the pouch across her body, her hickory stick firm in hand. The journey began without fanfare. Abigail walked between Thomas and Tsula, with Atsila leading and Yana trailing, their pace steady but mindful of her need to navigate with care. The forest path descended toward the creek, its gurgle a familiar guide. How far is the village? Abigail asked. Half a day's walk for those with sight, Tsula answered. Longer at our pace. Her tone held no judgment, only practicality, which Abigail appreciated. I'll try not to slow you, she promised. Time moves as it must, Tsula said cryptically. Some journeys cannot be rushed. As they crossed the creek, Thomas's steady hands guiding her over slippery stones, Yana spoke, his voice sharp. Soldiers will have scouts on the main trails. We should take the ridge path. His caution underscored the danger her presence brought, a weight Abigail felt keenly. The path climbed, the air thinning, scented with pine and frost. Abigail's stick tapped rhythmically, mapping the terrain's soft earth, rocky outcrops, roots like gnarled fingers. Then a low growl rumbled from the underbrush ahead, answered by another behind. "Wolves," Tsula whispered. "A pack." Fear gripped Abigail, her pulse hammering. One predator had been terror enough. A pack was a death sentence. "Circle," Thomas ordered softly. Abigail in the center. The group formed a protective ring, their movements swift and silent. Abigail clutched her stick, useless against such a threat, but a comfort nonetheless. "They don't usually hunt humans," Atsila said, confusion in her tone. "Something drives them," Yana added grimly. "Or someone." Another growl closer, accompanied by the soft pad of circling paws. Thomas began a Cherokee chant, its syllables flowing with ancient power. Tsula joined, their voices twining like vines, resonating through the air. The wolves' movements faltered, their growls turning to confused whines. "They hesitate," Tsula murmured to Abigail. The old words remind them of when wolf and man spoke as kin. Abigail, steeped in Kentucky pragmatism, wasn't sure she believed such mysticism, but the wolves' retreat was undeniable. Atsila seized the moment, striking flint to steel, igniting a handful of pine needles. "Fire," she announced, feeding the flame until it flared. "Now we hold our ground." The wolves drew back, their growls fading. Thomas decided, "We make torches." "Move with fire." They fashioned crude torches from pine branches wrapped in resin-soaked bark. Abigail was given a smoldering branch to hold, its heat a reassurance. They pressed on, the wolves tracking at a distance, their presence a constant menace. "They're being driven," Tsula said quietly, walking beside Abigail. "Something forces them against their nature." "What could do that?" Abigail asked, gripping her firebrand. Tsula paused. "Some among your people, and mine, know dark ways to bend animals." "Bad medicine." Her tone suggested she believed this over natural hunger, chilling Abigail more than the evening air. As darkness fell, the torches became their lifeline. Then Thomas's voice lifted. "Drums." Abigail strained, catching a faint, steady rhythm on the breeze. "The village welcomes the night," Tsula explained. "We're closer than I thought." The wolves seemed to hear it too, their tracking fading until Yana confirmed their retreat. Relief washed through the group, though vigilance remained. The drums grew louder, joined by voices, barking dogs, and the hum of a community settling into evening. The path smoothed beneath Abigail's feet, packed firm by countless steps. "Many will stare," Thomas warned softly. "Few have seen a white woman who walks in darkness." "I'm used to stares I can't see," Abigail replied, straightening. "Though I never imagined being a curiosity among the Cherokee." "Be respectful, not fearful," Tsula advised. "Our people honor strength in hardship." The village enveloped them, drums pausing, then resuming at a new tempo. Voices hushed, then erupted, children calling, adults questioning in rapid Cherokee. Thomas's hand steadied her elbow as they moved deeper, the air thick with wood smoke, roasting meat, unfamiliar herbs, and the scent of tanned hides. "The council house is ahead," Thomas murmured. "The elders will want to speak." Abigail nodded, her throat dry. Unseen eyes pressed against her, judging, wondering. A male voice, elderly yet commanding, spoke in Cherokee. Thomas translated. "Chief Galilahi asks why we bring a blind settler woman in troubled times." Before Abigail could respond, Tsula stepped forward, her Cherokee advocacy firm yet respectful. "Come," Thomas said when she finished. "To the council." The council house was vast, its echoes and smoky beams suggesting age and reverence. Abigail sat on a woven mat, Thomas beside her. The proceedings unfolded in Cherokee, with Thomas whispering translations. Chief Galilahi spoke first, his voice resonant with dignity. Atsila recounted their journey, the wolf encounter drawing murmurs. Yana's mention of soldiers at Willow Ford, searching for a blind woman, tightened the air. Thomas explained finding Abigail, his choice to help and her quick learning, his tone factual, unapologetic. Questions followed, some for Thomas, others for Tsula. Abigail sat quietly, understanding interruption would be disrespect. But as the debate continued in Cherokee, her patience frayed. "Thomas," she whispered, "they're deciding my fate. Shouldn't I speak?" Her words rippled through the council, understood despite the language. Chief Galalahi responded in accented English. "The blind one wishes to speak. We will hear her." Abigail turned toward his voice, gathering her thoughts. "Honorable Chief Council, I stand here not by choice but by fate. My kin left me to die. Thomas Greywolf showed kindness where my blood failed. I've learned from him to hear the forest, to walk without eyes, to value what matters. I know my presence brings risk. If you wish me to leave, I will, though I ask for guidance to safety." She squared her shoulders. "But know this, I have no wish to return to those who abandoned me or to bring soldiers to your doors. I seek only a place to live with dignity, despite my blindness." Silence followed, then Chief Galalahi spoke, his tone thoughtful. "You speak true, blind one, but these are perilous times. Treaties break, Cherokee land shrinks. Your presence may draw eyes we do not want." "I understand," Abigail said. "What would you have me do?" An elderly female voice joined, first in Cherokee, then English. "I am Grandmother Salali, 90 winters old. I've seen white men come, promises made and broken. This woman bears no fault for her people's wrongs. Those who walk in darkness often see with the spirit." Her support surprised Abigail, who bowed her head respectfully. Chief Galalahi considered. "She may stay 7 days, under Silent Owl's care. Then we decide her path." Thomas thanked him formally, and the council adjourned. As they left for Tsula's dwelling, the evening air carried the sizzle of cooking fires and children's curious whispers. "7 days isn't long," Abigail murmured. "Time enough for truth to rise," Thomas said cryptically. "Tsula has prepared a place for you." Tsula's home was sturdy, its central fire casting warmth. She guided Abigail's hands to map the space, a sleeping platform with soft furs, a shelf for her belongings. "Your kindness humbles me," Abigail said. "Why welcome me when others doubt?" Tsula paused, arranging herbs by the fire. "3 moons ago I saw you in a vision, a woman between worlds, eyes clouded, spirit clear." Abigail's breath caught. "You foresaw me." "Perhaps," Tsula said. "The spirits speak in riddles." She handed Abigail a bowl of fragrant stew. "Eat. Tomorrow brings trials." As Abigail savored the unfamiliar meal, she overheard Thomas and Tsula speaking in tense Cherokee tones. "Is something wrong?" she asked when Thomas bid her good night. "Nothing for tonight," he said, his candor softened. "I'll return at dawn." "Tsula stays near." "Where will you sleep?" Abigail asked, anxious at navigating this new world without him. "My dwelling, 3 homes toward the rising sun," he said, offering practical direction over vague comfort. After he left, Tsula helped her settle, showing her water for washing and guiding her through Cherokee nighttime rituals. As Abigail lay on the sleeping platform, furs shielding the autumn chill, the day's events overwhelmed her, from cave to village, from solitude to scrutiny. The 7-day reprieve felt both generous and fleeting. What would come when it ended? Sleep came with a final thought, Thomas's steady presence, a bridge across worlds she hadn't yet crossed. Integration and confrontation. Morning woke Abigail to women's soft Cherokee chatter, the thud of corn grinding, and children's laughter outside Tsula's dwelling. For a moment she was unmoored, the cave's solitude mingling with this vibrant community. "You're awake," Tsula said, her steps light. "Did the spirits bring dreams?" "I dreamed of crossing a river," Abigail admitted, "wide with no bridge or boat, yet I wasn't afraid." "Water dreams speak of change," Tsula said, pressing a cup of honeyed herbal tea into her hands. "Drink. It strengthens." The tea's aroma soothed, unlike anything from Kentucky's kitchens. "The women have questions about you," Tsula continued. "They wonder how a blind woman lives without sight." "I said you'd show them." Abigail's chest tightened. "Show them what?" "Your skills, your ways of knowing," Tsula said, as if it were obvious. "They must see you're not helpless." Before Abigail could respond, Thomas's step sounded, his pine-scented presence calming. "You rested well?" he asked. "Yes, though I'm to perform blind living today," Abigail said, a nervous edge creeping in. "The people must know you," Thomas said. "Fear comes from the unknown." "And if I fail them?" she challenged, setting down her cup. "Be you," he said simply. "No more, no less." After corn cakes and berries, Abigail stepped outside, met by hesitant then bold women. Through Tsula or Thomas, they asked how she navigated. "By smell, touch, sometimes others' words," Abigail explained, identifying basket contents: corn, squash, hickory nuts. "How do you choose clothes?" another asked. "By texture, weight," she said, "though colors are lost unless described." By midday, Abigail was teaching, showing women how she counted steps, recognized voices, arranged belongings. They shared their own tricks, knitted patterns to mark containers, scents like pine or sweetgrass to differentiate items. "Your people value practical wisdom," Abigail said to Thomas during a break. "Survival demands it," he replied, "and sharing what's learned." As they ate, Yana approached, speaking rapidly to Thomas, tension palpable. "What's happened?" Abigail asked. "Scouts report riders from Willow Ford," Thomas said. "6 men armed, 2 soldiers." Abigail's stomach nodded. "Looking for me?" "Perhaps," Thomas said. "Chief Galilahi orders preparations, women and children to houses, warriors to positions. You must be hidden." Tsula joined, urging Abigail toward Grandmother Salali's dwelling, less likely to be searched. They reached the ancient home, heavy with herb and smoke scents. "The blind woman brings trouble already," Salali said in accented English, chuckling. "No apologies for truth." "Sit." Thomas spoke rapidly with Salali, then turned to Abigail. "I join the warriors." "Stay with Grandmother." "Do as she says." Abigail caught his arm as he left. "If they are after me, maybe I should go prevent conflict." "We don't know their aim," Thomas said. "Those who left you may have motives beyond care." He was gone, leaving Abigail with the elder. Silence stretched, broken by Salali's observation. "You care for Silent Owl." "Your voice shifts when you speak to him," Abigail flushed. "He saved me, showed kindness where others didn't." "Kindness and love are different rivers," Salali said, "though they may join." Before Abigail could reply, English voices demanding, authoritative, carried from the village center, met by Cherokee restraint. "They come," Salali said. "Now we listen." The hour crawled, fragments of raised voices and commands filtering through. "What are they saying?" Abigail asked, unable to bear the uncertainty. "They seek a missing woman," Salali said. "Offer gold, speak of treaty duties." Abigail's hands clenched. "And our people?" Salali chuckled at "our." "Chief Galilahi says no white woman is here, offers food, suggests the storm took her to the river." A chilling thought struck Abigail. "What if they search?" "They won't find you," Salali said with certainty, leading her to a hidden pit beneath firs, used for winter storage or hiding. Abigail crawled in, Salali passing a fur to cover her. "Be still as stone," she advised, concealing the entrance. Time dissolved in the pit's darkness. Every sound magnified, then heavy boots, not moccasins, entered. A man's voice demanded answers. Salali played frail, her English halting. "Old woman alone. No white woman. Herbs, medicines." Another voice, impatient, searched, shifting furs, opening containers. "Winter food," Salali said calmly. "Roots, meat, corn." The boots passed over Abigail's hiding place, finally retreating with a slur, "Old squaw's junk," and a warning about treaties. Salali's hands pulled Abigail out. "They're gone from here, still searching elsewhere. Their words lie, they call you cherished, but their eyes hunt something else." "Did you know them?" "Was Henry Caldwell there?" Abigail asked. "I know no names," Salali said. "One wore fine cloth, not soldiers. Soft hands, unused to work. Offered most gold for you." Abigail shivered. Henry's hands were calloused from farm labor. "Who pursued her with such fervor, and why?" Evening fell with an eerie quiet, the village muted, holding its breath. Salali kept Abigail hidden until safe. Chief Galalahi entered, his presence commanding. "The men seeking you are relentless," he said in deliberate English. "They offer much gold, speak of your safe return." "I don't understand why they care now," Abigail said. "Perhaps you should ask their leader," Galalahi suggested. "He waits at the forest's edge, seeking any who have seen a blind woman." "A trap," Abigail protested. "They'll take me." "Not with Cherokee warriors at your side," Galalahi said. "Truth must be known." Thomas arrived, his presence steadying. "The leader isn't your cousin's husband," he said. "He's Edward Blackwood, from the Kentucky Banking Trust." Abigail froze. "Blackwood," she whispered. "That's impossible." "You know him?" Thomas asked, voice sharpening. "He was my father's banker," she said, connections snapping into place. "He handled our estate after my parents died, advised Henry to sell our land and go west." A suspicion formed. Unless there was something valuable on that land, he didn't want us to know. Thomas relayed this to Galalahi and Salali in Cherokee. "What did you tell them?" Abigail asked. "That a deeper game is afoot," Thomas said. "We must learn his true aim." A plan formed. Abigail would meet Blackwood on neutral ground, accompanied by Thomas, 2 warriors, and Salali, whose elder status might deter aggression. "I'll read his heart," Salali declared. "Eyes lie, voices don't." At dawn, Abigail wore a deerskin cape over her settler dress, her hair braided Cherokee style by Tsula to unsettle Blackwood. Her carved stick, etched with unseen symbols, grounded her. Thomas whispered the clearing's layout: open ground ahead, forest path behind, an oak hiding 2 warriors. "Reveal nothing of the cave or our time together," he murmured. "Let him think we found you recently." "They come," a warrior announced. 5 men, 2 armed. Abigail drew a breath, summoning courage. "Miss Harper," Blackwood's voice called, polished as a Louisville salon. "My dear, what relief to find you alive." "Mr. Blackwood," Abigail replied coolly. "You've gone to great lengths to find me. When we heard the Caldwells reached Willow Creek without you, I launched a search," he said. "They claim the storm took you, presumed dead." "How convenient," Abigail said, "and generous of you to mount such a rescue." She sensed his oily charm, the same he'd used on her father. "Your father was a friend," Blackwood said. "It's my duty to ensure his daughter's safety." Thomas shifted, signaling a lie. Abigail's father had called Blackwood a banking vulture. "Strange," she said. "I don't recall such concern when Henry took me from home and sold our land on your advice." Blackwood's pause betrayed surprise. The Caldwells were your guardians after your affliction. The sale was proper. And yet here you are, deep in Cherokee land with armed men, offering gold for a blind woman you helped send west, Abigail said, tilting her head. Why? Blackwood's tone softened, falsely sympathetic. You've suffered, my dear. These savages. These people saved me when my kin left me to die, Abigail cut in. They've taught me to thrive despite my blindness. We're grateful for their aid, Blackwood said smoothly, which will be rewarded. But it's time to return to civilization. Salali spoke in Cherokee, Thomas translating. She says his heart races like a cornered fox. He fears more than he cares. Abigail pressed. Before I go anywhere, Mr. Blackwood, what did you find on our land after we left? What's worth chasing a blind woman for? Silence fell, heavy with intent. These heathens have poisoned your mind, Blackwood said, his warmth gone. Your father's land was sold legally. What did you find? Abigail repeated. What's valuable enough to risk this? Salali spoke again, longer. Thomas translated. She says tell this snake Salali has seen 90 winters and white men's greed poison the land. She dreamed of yellow metal under Harper Land, men digging by night. His secrets are known to the spirits and the blind one's protectors. Gold, Abigail whispered, realization dawning. There's gold on our land. Ridiculous, Blackwood snapped, his voice pitching high, betraying panic. Primitive superstitions. My father spoke of odd-colored sands in our stream, Abigail said. You suspected, didn't you? You ensured our removal, then confirmed it. You have no proof, Blackwood said, calculation returning. No judge would heed a blind woman and her savage friends. Perhaps not, Abigail conceded, but proof can be found. Questions raised. Enough to spark investigation, unless you'd rather explain why you hunted me with soldiers. The standoff held, taut as a bowstring. Thomas spoke, his voice carrying authority. The woman stays with us until truth is clear. Go back to Willow Creek. No soldiers, no searching. Or what? Blackwood challenged. Or word spreads, Abigail said. To Willow Creek, Kentucky, anyone curious why Edward Blackwood needs to silence a blind woman. Blackwood's retreat was cold. This isn't over. No one threatens my name. We understand each other perfectly, Abigail said. As his men withdrew, she exhaled, the weight of her choice settling. He'll return, Thomas said quietly. Gold drives men to madness. Then we prepare, Abigail replied, her resolve forged in the fire of confrontation. The council's verdict and a mission begun. The Cherokee village pulsed with urgency as dusk settled over the Smoky Mountains. The council house aglow with firelight that cast dancing shadows on its ancient beams. Abigail Harper sat beside Thomas Graywolf near the central hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the autumn night seeping through the walls. The air thrummed with Cherokee voices, some sharp with concern, others measured with strategy, debating the fallout of Edward Blackwood's confrontation. Though Abigail couldn't parse the words, the tone spoke volumes. Fear of soldiers, anger at broken treaties, and the weight of her presence among them. Thomas leaned close, his whispers translating key moments, his breath carrying the faint scent of pine from their earlier walk. Some say Blackwood will bring troops, he murmured. Others believe he'll hide his true aim to avoid scrutiny. The chief thinks trouble comes either way. What does Chief Galilahi believe we should do? Abigail asked, her voice low, mindful of the council's gravity. That we must prepare for what's coming, Thomas replied. The question is how. The debate stretched into the night, occasionally shifting to English when questions turned to Abigail. She answered with care, detailing Blackwood's influence in Kentucky, his ties to bankers, lawmakers, and militia officers, and the legal quagmire she faced without proof of his deceit. "I have only suspicions," and his reaction to Grandmother Salali's words. She admitted to an elder's query, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "No hard evidence." "Sometimes a man's reaction speaks louder than his words," the elder observed, his voice like weathered oak. "Truth hides in what he fears to show." As the council neared its close, Chief Galilahi posed a question that silenced the room. Thomas hesitated before translating, his voice careful. "He asks where your loyalty lies now, with your own people, or those who saved you." The question hit Abigail like a Kentucky winter wind, sharp and unyielding. A month ago, the answer would have been clear. Despite the Caldwell's betrayal, she was a settler's daughter, bound by blood and upbringing to her world. But now, after the Cherokee's kindness, Thomas's teachings, and the strength she'd found in her blindness, the lines blurred. "My loyalty," she said slowly, her voice steadying, "lies with those who saw me as a person, not a burden to discard or a prize to claim. The Cherokee have shown me more humanity than my own kin. I would not bring harm to this village." Her words sparked murmurs, some approving, others skeptical. Chief Galilahi spoke at length, his tone deliberate. "The chief says you were granted 7 days among us," Thomas translated. "3 have passed. The council extends this to 14 days, during which we prepare for what comes. You remain under protection and watch." Abigail nodded, gratitude mingling with the weight of scrutiny. "Thank you for your trust, however limited." As the council dispersed, Thomas guided her back to Tsula's dwelling, the night air sharp with the first true bite of winter, like a Kentucky frost before a snow. "Do you mean what you told them?" Thomas asked, his voice softer, almost vulnerable. "About your loyalties?" Abigail paused, her stick tapping the packed earth. "I've been defined by others my whole life, first as a gentleman's daughter, then a blind burden, now a pawn in Blackwood's game. Here I'm starting to define myself." She turned toward him, though she couldn't see his face. "Yes, I meant every word." Thomas was silent for a moment, then spoke, emotion threading his words. "The path between worlds is hard. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, yet I find myself—" He trailed off, rare hesitation in his voice. "Find yourself what?" Abigail prompted gently. "Glad you walk it with me," he finished, the words simple yet heavy with meaning. Abigail's cheeks warmed despite the cold, a quiet connection blooming in the space between them. The next morning, the village buzzed with activity, like a Kentucky barn raising before a storm. Thomas arrived early, his voice taut with news. "Scouts say Blackwood and his men have left for Willow Creek, but we prepare for their return. The chief has assigned tasks, food stored, escape routes mapped, weapons readied." Abigail's brows rose. "And me? What can I do?" "Share knowledge," Thomas said. "Blackwood is your people's snake, not ours. You know his ways. Tsula and Grandmother Salali want to speak with you." In Salali's dwelling, heavy with the scent of sage and old smoke, the elderly woman began without preamble, Thomas translating. "Tell us of this gold seeker's power. Who stands with him? Who stands above?" Abigail considered carefully. "Blackwood has allies across Kentucky, bankers, lawmakers, militiamen. He's seen as respectable, his word trusted by those in power." She frowned, digging deeper. "But he's cautious. He wouldn't have come himself unless the stakes were high." "Gold makes men reckless," Tsula observed, her hand sorting dried herbs with practiced ease. "Not just any gold," Abigail realized, thinking aloud. If it were a small find, he'd have claimed it legally. This must be big, worth chasing me, worth risking scandal. Salali spoke at length, her wrinkled hands gesturing. Thomas translated. She saw men digging by night, in her vision many men, wagons heavy with burdens for weeks now. The implication hit Abigail like a thunderclap. He's mining secretly, using hired men sworn to silence. That's why he can't risk legal challenges or inquiries. He's stealing what should have been my family's, or at least properly claimed. How would you prove it? Tsula asked, practical as a Kentucky farmer. Abigail's hands twisted, frustration rising. That's the problem. Without sight, legal standing, or access to the land, I have no way to gather proof. The discussion circled possibilities and limits, leaving Abigail drained yet no closer to a solution. As they left, Salali grasped her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Vision comes not just from eyes, she said in accented English. You see more than you know, blind one. Truth waits in darkness for the right moment. Salali's words lingered as Abigail walked through the village, children now calling greetings, some daring to touch her skirts before giggling away. They've named you in Cherokee, Thomas said, amusement in his voice. Tsula Galagi Fox who listens. They say you hear what others miss. The nickname warmed Abigail like a hearth fire. I'm honored, she said, though I wish my listening had clearer answers today. Answers come when needed, not demanded, Thomas replied, his tone philosophical like an Appalachian preacher's proverb. The afternoon brought practical lessons, defensive skills Thomas insisted she learn. He taught her to pinpoint approaching footsteps, use her stick as a weapon, and memorize escape routes. 14 steps from the split oak to the stone outcrop, he instructed, tracing a path to a hidden cave system. Turn toward the morning sun, then 23 steps to the secret trail. Abigail committed each detail to memory, her mental map a lifeline. A thought struck her. Thomas, could someone from the village reach my family's land in Kentucky? Not to confront Blackwood, but to observe, confirm Salali's vision. Thomas considered. Possible but risky. A Cherokee alone in settler lands courts death or capture. What about you? Abigail pressed. You move between worlds. You could pass as a guide or hunter. His silence suggested he'd thought of it. The journey would take weeks. You'd be vulnerable here. I'm safer with your people than anywhere else, Abigail countered. If we prove Blackwood's illegal mining, we could protect the village. How would a blind woman present such evidence? Thomas asked, not unkindly. Abigail squared her shoulders. I'm still a gentleman's daughter. My father's old lawyer in Louisville might listen, or the governor's aide who respected him. If Blackwood's dodging taxes, the territorial authorities would care. Thomas weighed her words, then spoke with reluctant admiration. You think like both Fox and Wolf, now clever, determined. I'll speak to the chief. That evening, as Abigail learned to weave a waterproof basket with Tsula, she reflected on her transformation. A month ago, she'd been a passenger in her own life, swept along by others' choices. Now, she strategized for a community that had become her defenders. Your hands grow skilled, Tsula noted, guiding Abigail's fingers over a complex pattern. I've had good teachers, Abigail said, in more than weaving, Tsula hummed. When the storm brought you, I wondered why. Now I see a design in the chaos, a bridge builder. Bridge builder, Abigail echoed, her fingers pausing. One who stands between worlds, forging paths for others, Tsula said. The words echoed into the night, suggesting a purpose beyond survival, a role Abigail hadn't dared imagine. 3 days passed in watchful preparation, the village a hive of alertness. Hunters paired up, Children stayed close and night watches doubled. Thomas alternated between scouting and council meetings, returning each evening with updates. On the fourth day, as Abigail sorted herbs with Sula, Thomas approached. "The chief has decided," he said without preamble. "I'll go to your family's land in Kentucky. 2 warriors will join me partway." Abigail's hand stilled. "When?" "Tomorrow at dawn," he said, resignation and resolve in his voice. 3 weeks, maybe more if winter hits early. The prospect of his absence hit her like a sudden frost. Thomas had become her anchor, guiding her through physical and cultural darkness. "Who will?" she stopped, refusing to sound helpless. Thomas understood. "Yana will guard you. He's changed his view, says anyone who defies Blackwood has some merit." Abigail smiled at the grudging praise. High praise from Yana. That evening, the village gathered for a ceremony blessing Thomas's journey. Abigail sat with Salali, the Cherokee prayers and songs rising like smoke, their power transcending language. After, Thomas sought her out. "Walk with me," he said, leading her to a clearing where wind sang through young pines, a sound as familiar as a Kentucky hymn. They stood in silence, the night alive with autumn's chorus. "If I don't return," Thomas began, his voice hesitant, "Sula will ensure your safety. The chief grants you protection, whatever happens." "You'll return," Abigail said, her certainty surprising her. "The world between our peoples grows bloodier each season," Thomas said. "Nothing is sure." Abigail reached out, her hand finding his arm. "Then take this." She pressed her deerskin pouch, holding her mother's Bible into his hand. "A promise you'll come back." Thomas accepted it, his fingers brushing hers. "I have something for you." He placed a smooth, carved stone in her palm, a fox, her fingers traced. "Tsula Galagi," he said. "Fox who listens." "I carved it on night watches." Abigail closed her fingers around it, moved beyond words. "I'll listen for your return," she promised, the moment heavy with unspoken possibilities. Thomas spoke again, his voice low. "If we find proof, if Blackwood's crimes are exposed, what then? Would you return to your world?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know," she admitted. "A month ago, I'd have said yes. Now, I see there are many kinds of blindness. Among your people, I've learned to perceive what my old world denied me: value, strength." She faced him, wishing she could see his eyes. "What if I stayed? Would the village allow it?" "Some would," Thomas said. "Others wouldn't. The path between worlds is never easy." He paused, then added softly, "But it need not be walked alone." The words hung between them, a door cracked open to a future neither could yet name. "Return safely," Abigail said. "We'll speak of paths then." Dawn arrived with a bitter frost, the ground crunching underfoot as Thomas and his companions prepared to depart. The village gathered, faces solemn. Abigail stood with Sula and Salali, the carved fox clutched tight. Thomas bid farewell to the elders, then turned to her. "Trust your senses," he said, his voice steady but warm. "The forest speaks to those who listen." "I will," Abigail promised. "Thomas, may your path be clear." His hand touched her shoulder briefly, a gesture of connection, before his footsteps faded into the forest, carrying a piece of her heart. A new rhythm and rising threats. The days without Thomas settled into a new cadence. Abigail split her time between learning Cherokee crafts, basket weaving, beadwork with Sula, preparing medicinal herbs, and training with Yana in defensive skills. To her surprise, Yana proved patient, pushing her without mockery. "You move like Cherokee now," he said one afternoon as she navigated a forest path unaided. "Less like a settler scared of the earth." The earth teaches when you stop fearing it, Abigail replied, pride blooming like a spring dogwood. On the 10th day, the first snow fell, blanketing the village in a hush. Abigail stood outside Tsula's dwelling, snowflakes melting on her face, their delicate chill a reminder of Kentucky winters. Winter comes early, Tsula observed. The journey will be harder. Will they turn back? Abigail asked, worry tightening her chest. Silent Owl doesn't abandon a path, Tsula said with certainty. He'll press on, whatever the season. As snow deepened, Abigail sought Salali's company, drawn to the elders' stories bridging Cherokee history and personal memory. In my youth, Salali said one evening by her fire, Cherokee and settlers sometimes traded, learned, even wed, before greed poisoned it all. Could those days return? Abigail asked, turning the carved fox in her hands. Perhaps, Salali said, if bridge builders outlast wall makers. On the 17th day, a clear, biting morning, Yana burst into the council house where Abigail was learning tribal governance. Riders approach, he said, voice taut. Many armed. Abigail rose, heart racing. Blackwood. Yes, Yana confirmed, with soldiers more than before. The village erupted into action, women herding children, warriors taking positions, elders securing sacred items. Abigail was swept to Salali's dwelling, where the hidden pit awaited. No, she said, resisting Tsula's nudge. I won't hide. Blind woman against armed men is foolish, Yana argued. This fight is because of me, Abigail countered. I won't cower while others risk their lives. After debate, a compromise. Abigail would stay in Salali's dwelling, not hidden but not visible, deciding whether to emerge if Blackwood demanded her. As horses approached, men's voices barked demands, met by Chief Galalahi's dignified restraint. The exchange grew hostile. We know you're holding Abigail Harper against her will, Blackwood's voice rang out. Produce her or face consequences. No one is held against their will, Galalahi replied. Your accusations dishonor us. I have orders to search this illegal settlement, a military voice declared. Resistance is hostility against the United States. Abigail's fists clenched. Blackwood had returned with official sanction, using her as a pretext for violence. She rose, decision made. I'm going out, she told Tsula. They'll take you, Tsula warned. Perhaps, Abigail said, but on my terms. She stepped outside, her stick tapping confidently, the rhythm silencing the standoff. Mr. Blackwood, she called, voice clear in the winter air. I hear you're looking for me again. Miss Harper, Blackwood replied, false concern dripping like molasses. Thank heavens we've found you. These people rescued me when my guardians left me to die, Abigail interrupted, and have shown only kindness. She turned to the officer. Captain, I assume you've been told I'm a captive. A pause, then confusion. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Blackwood has affidavits from your family. The family that abandoned me because my blindness was inconvenient, Abigail cut in. How fortunate they've found such sudden concern. She stepped forward, stick finding solid ground. I stay with the Cherokee by choice, sir. And I'd ask why a banker brings soldiers to retrieve a woman declared dead. The standoff teetered, Blackwood's denials clashing with the officer's hesitation, Cherokee warriors poised. Abigail stood firm, her blindness sharpening her focus on sound-shifting feet, ragged breaths, unspoken intentions. As winter sunlight warmed her face, she chose not just for the moment but for the life ahead, guided by lessons learned in darkness, and a promise carried on the frost-laden wind. The stand and the path chosen. The winter air in the Smoky Mountains crackled with tension, sharp as a Kentucky frost before a blizzard. Abigail Harper stood at the heart of the Cherokee village, her hickory stick tapping a steady rhythm against the frozen earth, each sound a declaration of her presence. Her voice, clear and unwavering, had silenced the escalating standoff between Edward Blackwood's armed men and the Cherokee warriors poised to defend their home. The carved fox Tsula Galagi, fox who listens, rested in her pocket, a talisman of the strength she'd forged in darkness. Around her, the village held its breath, the weight of unseen eyes, settler, soldier, Cherokee pressing against her like a gathering storm. "Miss Harper," Blackwood repeated, his voice dripping with false relief, as if he'd found a lost lamb rather than a woman who just challenged his motives. "Thank heavens we've found you alive." His polished Kentucky accent, honed in Louisville's finest parlors, couldn't mask the edge beneath. Abigail cut through his charade, her tone as unyielding as the granite ridges surrounding them. "These people rescued me when my so-called guardians abandoned me to die, Mr. Blackwood. They've shown me kindness my own kin never did." She turned slightly, addressing the military officer she sensed nearby, her words deliberate, like a lawyer in a frontier courtroom. "Captain, I assume you've been told I'm held against my will." A pause, then the officer's voice, laced with confusion, broke the silence. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Blackwood has sworn affidavits from your cousin's family, claiming you were taken. The same family that left me alone in a storm because my blindness inconvenienced them." Abigail's voice sharpened, cutting like a well-aimed arrow. "How fortunate they've developed such sudden concern for my welfare." She took a step forward, her stick finding solid ground, its tap a metronome of resolve. "I remain with the Cherokee by choice, sir. And I'd suggest you ask why a respected banker brings armed men to retrieve a woman his own affidavits declared dead." The clearing fell silent, the standoff balanced on a knife's edge. Blackwood's denial sputtered, his composure fraying like an old quilt. "This is preposterous," he snapped, his voice rising, betraying the panic grandmother Salali had sensed in his racing heart. "You've been misled by these savages, Miss Harper. Come with us and we'll ensure your safety." Abigail tilted her head, her unseeing eyes seeming to pierce him. "Safety? Like the safety my cousin Henry Caldwell offered when he left me to drown in a creek? Or the safety you ensured when you advised him to sell my family's land for a pittance, only to chase me across the wilderness with soldiers?" Her words, honed by weeks of listening and learning, carried the weight of truth. She sensed the officer's hesitation, the shifting boots of Blackwood's men, the steady breaths of the Cherokee warriors behind her. The captain spoke, his tone cautious, like a man navigating a river's hidden rocks. "Ma'am, Mr. Blackwood claims you're a ward of his trust, lost in tragic circumstances. We're duty-bound to return you to lawful custody." "Lawful custody?" Abigail's laugh was sharp, bitter as chicory coffee. "The lawful custody that stripped me of my inheritance and left me to die. I'm no ward, Captain. I'm a woman who's learned to survive, thanks to the Cherokee, when my own people saw me as a burden." She straightened, her voice ringing with the conviction of a revival preacher. "If you seek justice, look to Mr. Blackwood's motives. Why does a banker risk his reputation and military lives to hunt a blind woman? What did he find on my family's land after we were conveniently removed?" Blackwood's breath caught, audible even to Abigail's keen ears. "This is slander," he barked, but the pitch of his voice betrayed him, high and unsteady like a cornered fox. "You have no proof of any wrongdoing. Your father's land was sold legally, the proceeds managed for your benefit." "No proof," Abigail countered, her voice calm but relentless. "Perhaps not yet, but proof can be gathered. Questions can be asked by the territorial authorities, by the Louisville courts, by anyone curious why Edward Blackwood pursues a blind woman with such desperation. Gold, perhaps, hidden beneath my family's land, mined in secret while you thought me dead. She let the accusation hang, heavy as a storm cloud, her words echoing Grandmother Salali's vision of men digging by night. The officer's silence was telling, his authority wavering. Blackwood's men shifted, restless, their loyalty to his coin tested. The Cherokee warriors, led by Chief Galilahi's steady presence, stood firm, their silence a wall of resolve. Abigail felt the dynamics shift, her blindness sharpening her perception of every sound: Blackwood's ragged breathing, the captain's uncertain pause, the village dog's low growls in the distance. "You overstep, Miss Harper," Blackwood said, his voice cold, stripped of its earlier charm. "A blind woman lost in the wilderness is a tragedy, but hardly surprising. And the Cherokee harboring you. They risk military consequences, retaliation, perhaps. How many lives are you willing to endanger for your suspicions?" The threat against the village struck Abigail deeper than any personal danger. These people had saved her, taught her, seen her worth when her own kin had not. She would not be the spark that burned their home. Before she could respond, Grandmother Salali's voice rose, first in Cherokee, then in accented English, sharp as a honed blade. Thomas translated, his voice steady beside her. "She says this man's greed poisons the land like bad water. She has seen yellow metal under Harper land, wagons heavy with secret burdens. The spirits have spoken his deceit to the blind one's protectors." Abigail seized the moment, her voice rising like a hymn in a Kentucky church. "Gold, Captain. My father spoke of strange sands in our stream, pretty, he thought, but worthless. Blackwood suspected otherwise, didn't he? He ensured our removal, then mined in secret, evading taxes, defying law. That's why he's here, not for me, but to silence the truth." "Enough," Blackwood roared, his composure shattered. "These primitive superstitions are nonsense. No court will believe a blind woman and her savage allies over a man of my standing." "Perhaps not," Abigail conceded, her tone deceptively mild, "but courts love gold, Captain. And the territorial government loves taxes. If Blackwood's mining without claim or payment, questions will be asked by judges, by newspapers, by men far above your pay. Unless, Mr. Blackwood, you'd care to explain now why you've hunted me with soldiers into Cherokee land." The standoff stretched, taut as a fiddle string ready to snap. Thomas spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who knew both worlds. "The woman stays with us until the truth is settled. Return to Willow Creek. No soldiers, no more searching." "Or what?" Blackwood challenged, his voice a snarl. "Or word spreads," Abigail interjected, her tone steady as a river's flow. "To Willow Creek, to Louisville, to every ear curious why Edward Blackwood fears a blind woman's voice. The truth has a way of finding light, sir, even in the darkest wilderness." Blackwood's silence was a confession of its own, his calculations audible in his uneven breaths. Finally he spoke, his voice icy with fury. "This isn't over. No one threatens my name, no one." His retreat was signaled by the crunch of boots and the restless snorts of horses, a grudging withdrawal that left the air heavy with unresolved menace. "He'll return," Thomas said quietly as the sounds faded. "Men driven by gold don't surrender." "Then we'll be ready," Abigail replied, her resolve forged in the fire of the moment, her heart pounding with the weight of her stand. The village exhaled, the tension easing like a storm passing over the Smoky Mountains. Chief Galilahi called an immediate council, the firelight flickering across faces etched with both relief and wariness. Abigail sat beside Sula, Thomas's absence a quiet ache, though his carved fox in her pocket anchored her. The council debated in Cherokee, voices rising and falling, strategizing for the inevitable next move. Thomas's mission to Kentucky loomed large proof of Blackwood's crimes could shift the balance, protect the village, and secure Abigail's future. An elder addressed her in English, his tone probing. "You spoke boldly, Tsula Galagi. But if proof is found, what then? Will you return to your people's world?" Abigail's fingers traced the fox, its smooth curves a reminder of the path she'd walked. "My people's world saw me as a burden, a pawn, or a threat," she said, her voice steady. "Here I've learned to see with my heart, to live with purpose. If the village allows, I'd stay not as a guest, but as one who builds bridges between our worlds." Her words sparked murmurs, some warm, others cautious. Chief Galalahi spoke, his voice resonant. Tsula translated, "The chief says your heart speaks Cherokee truth, but the path is not yet clear. You remain under our protection until Silent Owl returns with answers. Then we decide together." Abigail nodded, gratitude mingling with anticipation. "I understand, and I'm grateful for your trust." As the council adjourned, Tsula guided her back to the dwelling, the night air crisp with the scent of snow and pine, like a Kentucky winter's promise. Children's voices, now familiar, called her Cherokee named Tsula Galagi, their giggles a sign of acceptance. Inside, Tsula stoked the fire, its crackle a comforting hymn. "You stood like a warrior today," she said, handing Abigail a cup of sage tea. "The spirits chose well when they sent you to us." "I was terrified," Abigail admitted, sipping the tea, its warmth grounding her. "But I couldn't let Blackwood use me to hurt this village." "Fear is no shame," Tsula said. "Courage is walking through it." Abigail smiled, the carved fox warm in her hand. "Thomas taught me that in his way." Tsula's eyes, unseen but felt, softened. "Silent Owl sees you as we do a bridge builder. Whatever path you choose, he will walk it with you." The words settled deep, a quiet hope blooming. Abigail's world, once narrowed by blindness and betrayal, had expanded beyond imagining a life of purpose, connection, and possibility, rooted in the Cherokee village that had become her home. A promise kept and a future forged. Weeks passed, the Smoky Mountains cloaked in winter's embrace, snow muffling the village's rhythms. Abigail threw herself into her role, learning healing herbs with Tsula, teaching children to navigate by sound, weaving baskets that earned nods from the village women. Her blindness, once a cage, became a gift, her heightened senses a bridge to others. Yet each night she listened for Thomas's return, the carved fox a constant companion, her mother's Bible safe in his hands. On the 25th day, as dawn painted the snow with pale light, a shout broke the village's hush. "Silent Owl returns," Yana's voice carried, and Abigail's heart leaped. She stepped outside Tsula's dwelling, the cold biting her cheeks, her stick tapping eagerly. Footsteps approached Thomas's familiar stride, steady despite weeks of hardship. "Abigail," he called, his voice warm with relief, closer now. She reached out, her hand finding his arm, the leather of his coat dusted with snow. "You're back," she said, her smile breaking through. "Did you find it?" Thomas guided her inside, where Tsula and Salali waited. His voice, weary but triumphant, filled the space. "The land in Kentucky bears scars, deep pits, wagon tracks guarded by hired men. Blackwood's mining gold, untaxed, unclaimed. I have maps, samples, testimony from a laborer who spoke for coin." Salali's chuckle was sharp. "The spirit spoke true. The snake's greed is his undoing." "What now?" Abigail asked, her pulse quickening. "We send word to Louisville," Thomas said. "Your father's lawyer, the one you named, he'll listen." The territorial governor will too, when taxes are at stake. Blackwood's empire will crumble under scrutiny. Chief Galalahi joined them, his presence commanding. Through Tsula he spoke, "Tsula Galagi, you have earned a place among us. The council offers you a home, not as guest but as kin if you choose it." Abigail's throat tightened, the weight of the offer profound. "And if I stay, what of the world I left?" "Your truth will be told," Thomas said, his hand brushing hers, returning the deerskin pouch with her Bible. "Blackwood's crimes will be exposed, your family's land reclaimed or compensated. You need not return to claim it." Abigail traced the Bible's embossed cover, then the fox in her pocket. Her choice was clear, rooted in the lessons of the wild, the kindness of strangers turned kin, and the man who'd seen her strength when she couldn't. "I choose to stay," she said, her voice ringing with certainty. "To build bridges, to live as Tsula Galagi among the Cherokee, if you'll have me." Galalahi's nod, felt more than seen, sealed her place. Thomas's hand squeezed hers, a silent promise. "The path between worlds is hard," he said softly, "but we'll walk it together." The village erupted in quiet celebration, drums pulsing like a heartbeat, voices rising in song. Abigail stood among her new kin, the Smoky Mountains a vast embrace around her. The storm that had torn her from her past had blown her towards salvation, a life defined not by blindness, but by the vision she'd found in darkness, guided by a Cherokee scout and the unyielding spirit of a woman reborn. Epilogue, a legacy of listening. As spring thawed the Smoky Mountains, Abigail, now Tsula Galagi, thrived in her role as bridge builder. She taught settlers and Cherokee alike, sharing skills of navigation and survival, her blindness a beacon of possibility. Blackwood's empire fell, his illegal mines exposed by Thomas's evidence, sparking reforms in Kentucky's land laws. The Cherokee village, strengthened by Abigail's presence, negotiated new protections, their voices louder in a world that too often silenced them. Each evening, Abigail and Thomas walked the pine-edged clearing, their hands entwined, their paths one. "You've changed this place," Thomas said one night, the whippoorwill's call a soft backdrop. "And it's changed me," Abigail replied, the carved fox warm in her palm. "I was blind long before the fever, seeing only what others allowed. Now I see everything." Their laughter mingled with the forest's song, a testament to a love and a life forged in the crucible of the wild, where the heart's vision outshines the eyes, and bridges built in darkness endure. If this tale stirred your soul, 2 more stories await on your screen. Click to dive in. Subscribe and ring the bell to catch every yarn we spin, straight from the heart of the American frontier.